Hello everyone, this is my final course project presentation for Food Science 575. My name is Victor Voyce and my project is increased dog walks. My problem statement, or what I wanted to accomplish, is my Labrador Retriever is beginning to age, and when I took him to the vet for his annual checkup, she had some concerns. She explained to me that the older he gets, the more likely he is to develop joint and muscle issues that could prohibit him from having an active lifestyle. A way to help reduce the onset of these issues is to have a more consistent physical activity level for him. Now, the most common type of physical activity that we do together is going for a daily walk. So I decided to work off of that. So what I decided to measure are two variables to track his physical activity level was the amount of time that it took us to walk a measured half-mile distance around the neighborhood and how frequently we take this walk. I took the measurements on days that I was at work, which consists of 5 days a week. The reason I didn't include all 7 days of the week was that usually the other 2 days we spend time doing other activities that could potentially affect his energy level for that day. Sometimes we're in the lake, swimming, what have you. So I chose to only do 5 days. On this slide, you can see some of my initial measurements. So I have 3 weeks worth of data here, and my walk frequency was anywhere from 4 to 5 times a week. And my average walk times were shown here in minutes. So one of my values that is 17.03, this would be 17.03 minutes, so the 0.03 is not in seconds. So analysis on the initial data, you can see here that I have an average walk time of 16.63 minutes, and there is some variation between week 1 and weeks 2 and 3. This could have been caused by the new route that I introduced to my dog. Normally we don't walk this way, so there's some things that he might have be curious about that he's not normally accustomed to. As you can see from my control chart, there aren't any data points that are completely out of limits or out of my control limits, so overall the data is pretty centralized around our center line. So the next thing I decided to do was create a root cause analysis, and this is all things that could play a factor in our walk frequency and time. So it could start from the time I get out of work to how long it takes for us to eat dinner, to buying groceries at the store, whether it's snowing or raining outside. This could cause a delay in our walking, how many bathroom breaks he has to take, or any distractions such as neighbors coming up to talk to us or other animals that are grabbing his attention. So based off the analysis in the previous slide, I determined that the amount of time I had after work was the main factor for walk frequency. So I made a first improvement plan to implement a meal prep for the week to reduce the amount of time spent making dinner after work. I cooked 5 meals the day before my work week that would be used for dinner. So generally this was on a Sunday, and I would just cook dinner ahead of time. I also spent that day to conduct my grocery shopping for the entire week. That way I eliminated those 2 potential factors for my walk frequency and time. These are some of my measurements after the improvement. So as you can see here, right off, you can see that my frequency has changed from 4 to 5 to 7 and 8 times a week. We have 4 weeks worth of data presented. And on some of these days we go for 2 walks, and some days we only go for 1. But on the next slide I will show a further analysis of what these numbers compare to the previous measure phase numbers. After looking at my weekly times compared to the measure phase, my overall time did not have much variation. My average time between the measure phase and the improvement phase were at a difference of 0.36 minutes. So on this top chart here, top bar chart, you can see that my average is 16.27 and my other average was 16.66. So there's not a huge variation, and we can't really determine any trends of our time changing after the improvements. At least not right off the bat. Looking at my control chart below, I have my values for this entire improvement phase. You can see most of the values are within the control limits and nothing completely out of the center line. As you can see, between groups 19 and 30, most of my values are not as high, or is not as close to the upper control limit. They are getting closer to the lower control limit. Here is my frequency control chart. The red line is the frequency measured during the measure phase, and the blue line is the frequency during the improve and analyze phase. Based off of the improvement, we can see that more walks are made after the meal prep. The range is similar in size from the measure phase compared to the improvement phase as well. After analyzing the initial data and completing a root cause analysis, I was able to improve the overall frequency of walks by 57%. This exceeded my goal of 10%. In the future, I will continue to implement the improvement of meal prepping for dinner. The other goal of decreasing the total time spent for each walk only showed a decrease of 2.15%. This is not anywhere near our 10% decrease goal, so I have decided to implement a second improvement plan. My second improvement plan would be listening to music with more than 165 beats per minute during our walks. My music app, Spotify, has a whole category of songs that are above 165 beats per minute, so I will play this during our walks and see if this shows any improvement. So here are some of the values after my second improvement plan was utilized. We have 2 weeks worth of data here, and our walk frequency stayed pretty close to our initial improvement plan at around 8. And we do have some values here for the days of the week. Some of them appear to be lower than the initial improvement plan, but we will analyze this further in another slide. This is a frequency control chart of dog walks after week 7, 8, and 9. You can see there on the right are about in line with everything else. So it was mainly, I was able to add 2 additional data points to my chart. And as discussed before, the red line is before the improvement. Okay, this is the data after the improvement phase. So this bar chart represents the entire improvement phase from the first improvement plan to the second improvement plan and an average at the very end. And from the initial looks of the values, we can see that there seems to be a downward trend on the average weekly walk time. We can also see that on the control chart that we have our first point outside of the lower control limit at subgroup 45. So this one control point could call for a reanalysis of our lower control limits and our center line for the entire data. So, and the total improvements begin after subgroup 31. After subgroup 31, that is when we started listening to music during our walks. In conclusion, my first improvement plan of meal prepping kept my walk frequency at a steady rate. Overall, for the improvement phase, I saw a 43% increase from the initial measure phase. So this definitely exceeded our goal of a 10% increase. Now, my walk time did not change enough after my first improvement plan. I only saw a 2.15% decrease, as discussed earlier, of my walk time. So we implemented our second improvement plan. And if I only took the data collected over those last 2 weeks, I see a decrease in walk time by 9.2% and a 4.46% decrease over the entire data set for the improvement phase. Now that 9.2% is mainly what I want to look at because that is what came after my second improvement. Although I didn't reach my goal of a 10% decrease in walk time, I believe that with additional data I could reach this desired outcome in later weeks. And that concludes my presentation over my final course project. I appreciate everyone's time and Merry Christmas.